traditional ways of doing business to doing business in the cloud, commonly called going digital. Now, a lot of businesses have seen reasons to do this, but there is a gap in skill when it comes to setting up and running these cloud services. So professionals who are skilled in these areas are quite hard to come by. So if you're certified, that already makes you stand out to these businesses that, oh, this person is certified by Google, therefore they can rely on you for their digital transformation processes and so on. I mean, if you look at the recent pandemic, you see that a lot of businesses have found out that they really need to move online. I mean, regardless of how big your business is, if you're not digital or have some digital component, you go out of business. So there's a skill gap. So how do you stand out? It's by getting certified and picking up those skills. I mean, personally, we have seen the benefits of this, and we'd like to say again that we're excited to be here and thank everybody for being around. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, sir, for that. Thank you for actually honoring the invitation to give the opening remarks. So without wasting much time, I'll just give some announcements that would actually guide us through the event. Okay, so this actually is a meetup organized, as I mentioned before, organized by several GDG chapters. And of course, we have to thank Dan for accepting to be with us today. All right, so during this event, there is a question app, and basically for questions, so you can send in your questions. I'll be dropping a link. And also, we have students from the Google Africa Developer Scholarship. Actually, most of them are here. We also have so many cloud enthusiasts who are here to be impacted by Dan. So during this meetup also, we have giveaways from Dan and also from JetBrain. So towards the end of this session, Dan will be sharing a link to his course, a coupon link to his course that will give you 100% access, free discount to the course for life. So you should just hang around for that. The course is about, of course, why we are here, how to get certified, and the steps, everything you need to know about the exams, everything you need. The course is very loaded, so you might want to stay around for that. And also, we have a JetBrain coupon to give out, which is for any JetBrain products you select to give you access for 1 year. So that also will be announced, but that is not for everybody. Actually, it's going to be won through a contest. All right. So on meetup guidelines, this is a meetup. I would want us to respect each and every one of us here. Respect everyone's opinion. Respect everyone's identity. Respect everyone's point of view, and also try as much as possible to keep your mic muted. You can put on your videos. That's very fine because it actually increases more interaction. So you can put on your videos, but your audio mic should be off until probably you're asked to present something, or we ask you to, probably you want to ask a question. We actually want you to come up to ask that question. As I mentioned before, we have a channel for questions, so we might want to just use the channel. All right, so basically what you need for this event is just your phone, your PC, your internet properly working. So, all right, I would like to invite the GDG lead of GDG Ilorin, to actually do the honors of introducing our special guests. I don't know if he's on the call. Okay, GDG lead Ilorin. I don't know if he's on the call. Okay. I think I might have to do that myself. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, here we have today Dan Sullivan. Dan Sullivan is very, very, very accomplished when it comes to cloud computing. And the first day I got to saw his LinkedIn profile, I was overwhelmed. Professional certificates, associates, data engineering, so many certifications in cloud. So it's actually the best person we can have to discuss this topic. So Dan Sullivan is a principal engineer with Pick6 Technologies. He's a software architect and a data scientist with extensive experience in data science, machine learning, and cloud architecture. Dan is the author of the official Google Cloud study guides for the professional architect, professional data engineering, associate cloud engineering certificate exams, as well as the instructor of over dozens of courses on machine learning, data science, cloud computing on LinkedIn and Udemy. He also holds a PhD in genetics, bioinformatics, and computational biology with a focus on infectious disease genomics. So with the honors, I would like to introduce Dan Sullivan to come to the, if this is actually a physical event, probably we'll be walking to the stage by now, but this is an online event. So Dan, you have the floor, and thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, wonderful. And thank you. And thank you to all the GDG leads and group leads and developers who went to all the effort to put this together. I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to talking to you about Google Cloud. I'm really excited that there's so much interest in Google Cloud. There are a number of public clouds out there, and I really feel like Google is the best, and there's a lot of opportunity there. So it's great to see so many people having so much interest that they'd spend such a big part of their day learning about it. I think this is a great sign. So what I'd like to do today is start by talking about the Google Cloud certification exams and what they are. And actually, what I'd like to do is spend the if not the bulk of my time, at least the start of the time, talking about how to take the test, because the course, the Udemy course, covers a lot of the details about how to take the Associate Cloud Engineer exam and what kind of information you need to know about Google Cloud to pass that one. But the test itself is something of an artificial thing. I mean, when we work with Google Cloud, when we're just working during the day, we're working on our keyboards with the console, maybe in a command line. But the test environment's really different. And so what I want to do is kind of help you understand what that test environment is, so that you get to show off as how much you know, and that you don't have trouble passing just because of the way the test is set up and not because of what you know. So what I'll do is I'll start presenting here, and let me just share out my screen. Actually, I've shared the wrong one. I will present. Entire screen. And here we go. We've got some slides here. And I believe I'm showing you some slides, but if at any time something isn't going right, please let me know. I'm very happy to be informal about this, so please jump in anytime if it looks like something's not quite going right. So again, basically what I'm hoping to do is talk to you about tips and best practices for preparing for the Associate Cloud Engineer exam. A lot of what we'll cover today, actually, with regards to taking the exam, actually applies to any of the exams. So if you're interested in the cloud architecture or data engineer exam or the new machine learning exam, a lot of the material here applies to that as well. So first, I just want to talk a little bit about how Google sets up their exams. There's really there's two tiers or two tracks for GCP or Google Cloud Platform certifications. The first is the Associate Cloud Engineer. And there, the focus is really on technical requirements. And it's about how you build out cloud infrastructure, like creating virtual machines or setting up clusters for running Kubernetes or deploying a relational database in Cloud SQL. And when you do that, when you take the test and you focus on those kind of things, a lot of the questions on the test are around how do you do a particular thing? Like how do you create a backup in Cloud SQL, or how do you load data into BigQuery? So it's very much of a kind of a hands-on question. And that's the associate engineer level. And then the other level is called the professional certification level. And that covers everything that the associate cloud engineer covers, but it also covers understanding business requirements. And there the difference is, it's not just that you have to know, for example, how to create a particular kind of backup from a Cloud SQL database. You need to understand why you would be working with Cloud SQL to begin with. Why would you choose a relational database over a NoSQL database? Or how would you implement a data flow pipeline to support a machine learning project? Those are the kinds of questions that come at the professional level. In all cases, the exams are scenario-based. So each question is sort of like a story, like you're a consultant working in a company and you need to develop a database, and it gives you a whole bunch of requirements or technical requirements, and you have to figure out the answer from there. With the associate cloud engineer, the answer you need to figure out is mostly like a technical question. You have to be able to answer a very specific kind of question, like what command would you use? At the professional level, it's often how would you design something and why would you choose a particular thing? So later on in this talk, I'm going to go over kind of several questions and show like how to analyze questions and think about answers. So the first thing I want to talk about is a study strategy. So I kind of divide up preparing for the exam into two parts. There's the study strategy, which helps you get ready for the exam. And then there's actually a strategy for actually taking the exam. So when you're sitting down and you're in the proctored exam, either online or in a test center, what do you do? So for the first part, we'll talk about the study strategy. And here, again, I'm talking mostly about the Associate Cloud Engineer exam. But again, a lot of this applies to other exams as well. So the first thing I would say, and I say this all the time to people when they ask me, how long should I study? And really, that all depends. The most important thing by far with Google Cloud certifications is that you actually work with Google Cloud. You actually use the Google Cloud console, the command line. You should be able, start up virtual machines in Compute Engine, create databases in Cloud SQL, load data into cloud storage. Now, when you use Google Cloud, oftentimes you're going to get charged for it. So Google provides a $300 credit when you first sign up. So you can use basically any of the services in Google Cloud. You can use $300 worth. And that's really enough to, from a studying perspective, from preparing for the exam, $300 will go a long way. And then in addition to that, even if you run through the entire $300 credit, there's always a free tier. And the free tier is a set of services that you can run. For example, like you can run one small virtual machine instance, an F1 micro instance. And you can store about 5 gigabytes of data in cloud storage. And even if you do that all month, have a machine running all month, you won't be charged for it. So you can get free access to Google Cloud, and really working with Google Cloud is probably the single most important thing you can do to prepare for the exam. Now, another thing you want to know about the exam is that each certification exam has an exam guide. And the exam guide is a fairly detailed list of topics that are covered in the exam. And I have found the exam guide really is an excellent outline of what you need to know for the exam. So what I do is when I'm starting to prepare for an exam, the first thing I do is go to the exam guide and I start looking at what are the topics that are covered. And I start to think to myself, which areas am I weakest on? Where do I need to start preparing? So I really, again, sort of as a second thing I would recommend is, look at the study guide and try and get a sense of, what you already have a really good handle on, you have a good understanding of, and which things you're going to need more preparation for. And that'll help you focus on those. Now, there are a number of resources out there. Some of the ones that I really like the Coursera courses. I think Coursera is just an excellent resource. And the Google Cloud courses on Coursera are developed by Google. So they're really well done, and I highly recommend them. And oftentimes Google will have a preparation course that's geared to a particular exam, like there's a course on preparing for the Google Cloud Associate exam. And that's really good. It's a good background. I would say none of the courses alone are enough to pass the exam, but if you take these courses that I talk about, plus do some hands-on stuff, hands-on work, then you'll probably be in good shape. So again, Coursera exams are excellent. Also, I'll mention Google has an annual conference, and it's called Google Next, or Google Cloud Next. And that's like a 3-day conference that's held every year. And Google records all of the sessions from those conferences. And those are really an excellent resource too. So as you're studying and you're going through the exam guide, if you notice there are some topics you're not really strong on, for example, networking, if that's the case, one of the things I would recommend is going to YouTube and searching for Google Cloud Next networking sessions and watching those. The sessions are excellent. They're not necessarily geared specifically to passing a certification exam, but they're really good introductions and sometimes good deep dives into particular topics. So I definitely recommend those as well. Now, I do have a Udemy course, and I'm happy to share that with everyone here. And I'll give out a link at the end of my talk. And feel free to share this link. Anyone here is welcome to sign up for the course for free. If you have colleagues or friends who might be interested, feel free to share it with them as well. As many people can sign up with this free link as would like. The only limit is you have to sign up within the next couple of days, but I'll talk about that. But definitely feel free to share it. The more people that get access to this course, the happier I am. So, and then also I have a website, dansullivanlearning.com, which has links to some of the courses, both on Udemy and well as some courses I do on LinkedIn. And if I have other resources, I will post them there as well. So definitely feel free to check that out. Okay, now for some more details with regards to the sort of overall study strategy. First of all, again, the exam guide is really important. Also, with any exam that's sort of the official exam, it's no longer in beta, there's a practice exam. And these practice exams are 20 questions. And the questions are questions that used to be on the exam. So they might have been test questions that Google tried out and then decided to remove. But they're really close to what the exam is like, and they give you a really good idea of what the actual certification exam is like. So I strongly suggest taking the practice exam, and I would suggest taking it early. If you decide, okay, I want to go for the Associate Cloud Engineer exam, I would say the second thing after looking at the exam guide is to take the practice test. And don't worry if you get it wrong, if you get, even if you get a lot of the questions wrong. That's not a problem, because there's detailed explanations about what the correct answer is, and as you take the exam, you'll start to get an idea of how Google asks questions, how they formulate questions. So the practice test is really important. And again, the way I work is I try to focus on my weakest areas. And everybody's going to have you know, areas that they tend to work in and tend not to. One of the most difficult things about the associate cloud engineer is that it covers so many different things. You have to know compute engine and how to set up a virtual machine, as well as App Engine and Kubernetes engine. So all about like setting up machines and working with containers. But then you also need to know about databases and how to work with networking. And like for example, I do a lot of work with databases, analytics, setting up virtual machines, containers. I don't do a lot of work on like networking and firewall rules. So that's sort of an area that I have to spend more time studying for and preparing for. So whatever your core areas are, that's great to know those, but you will also be tested on all of the areas. So it's important to understand which your weak ones are and be able to like study for those. And then also, as you're studying, it's great to keep a window open in your or a browser tab open and actually try stuff in either the Cloud Console or in the Cloud Shell. Especially working with Cloud Shell, oftentimes there's questions about, what's the command line to do some particular task. So it really helps to have kind of worked with the command line before you run into those questions. Some more about the exam. So the exams they're all 2 hours long, and they come with 50 multiple choice questions. Sometimes you can have multiple answers. Oftentimes, there's like 4 options and you pick one. Sometimes it's 5 options and you pick 2 or something like that. But they're definitely multiple choice. And one of the nice things about taking the exam is you get 1 question per screen, and one question per screen, and you're able to mark the questions for review. So after you go through all 50 questions, it's very easy to like jump back and go look back at ones that you might not be quite sure of. So when I take the test, I often mark, probably 1/3 of the questions and jump back just to take looks at those. So when you're taking the test, there's 2 things you really want to focus on when you're reading the question. The first is to identify like the key services or the software that they're talking about in the question. And it might be, Cloud PubSub that they're talking about, or Cloud Dataproc, but whatever it is they're talking about, you want to make sure you know which service is being referred to. And then also you want to start thinking in terms of what are the technical requirements. So for example, they might be a question that's talking about a relational database, and the database has to be, say, 50 gigabytes in size, and there's some other requirements. That's important because requirements like that can help you narrow down the options. So for example, I talked about a relational database. Well, there's 2 managed services available in Google Cloud for relational databases. One is Cloud SQL, and the other is Cloud Spanner. Now, Cloud SQL can manage databases up to 30 terabytes. So if we need to work with a database that's 50 terabytes and it needs to be relational, and we want to use a managed service, then Cloud Spanner is the one we're going to use. So oftentimes, those sort of technical requirements can help you narrow down which option is correct. And another thing that I've noticed about taking these tests is that typically there's 4 options, sometimes 5. There's often 1, maybe 2 options that are almost certainly not the correct answer. But then there's often 2 that are very close. And sometimes I find a lot of what I do is spend time trying to narrow down between those 2 options. So often, the thing as you're taking the test, just remember there may be a couple that are close, and you can eliminate some of the obvious ones that aren't correct. And what you really want to do is focus on the ones that are what I call the near misses, the ones that are close but not actually the correct answer. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what you need to know. As I said, the associate cloud engineer is difficult because it covers so many different topics. But some topics you need to have more in-depth knowledge of than others. And the first one is identity and access management. So that's the main sort of security from an access control perspective, the main security service that we work with in Google Cloud. And you really have to understand that really well. The key concepts to understand there are roles and permissions. And permissions are essentially grants that allow someone an identity to do certain things. And it could range from creating a bucket to viewing a list of tables in a database to starting a job in Cloud Data Flow. So permissions are grouped together in roles. And so permissions are the things that actually let you do something. Roles are collections of permissions that are grouped together. And it's the roles that we assign to identities, like to a user or to a service account. So one thing that's really important to know is you never assign a permission directly to a user or to any kind of identity. You assign it to a role, and then you assign roles to those identities. So you want to make sure you understand the structure of roles. You want to understand the distinction between predefined, custom, and primitive roles. And predefined roles are ones that Google has created. And those are typically geared toward a particular role within an organization or a particular task. So if you're like a database administrator, there's like a Cloud SQL admin role, you might be assigned that. There's a data owner role in Bigtable. So if you own data and you manipulate data, but you're not administering the database, you might have the data owner role. So those are predefined roles, and they have all the permissions somebody performing those tasks commonly need. Sometimes those roles aren't really good fits, and you might need to, say, add some additional permissions or remove some. In that case, you can use custom roles. And then finally, there are primitive roles, which are the roles that existed before the IAM service did. And we don't often use those, almost never in production, but sometimes when you're setting up like a development environment, primitive roles are fine because you might have, say, a small group of developers who need access to pretty much everything in your project. In that case, it's fine to use primitive roles, but for the most part, we use predefined roles and occasionally use custom roles when the predefined roles don't fit. Another thing in terms of topics that are really important is networking. And I say this as someone who's really not, I don't do a lot of networking, as I said. So for me, when I am taking any Google Cloud exam, I spend a lot of time brushing up and reviewing networking. And the things that you need to understand are virtual private clouds. So that's, the basic high-level structure in Google Cloud is the virtual private cloud. You want to understand subnets and how they relate to virtual private clouds. So basically, you can have a subnet in different regions. And then there's also CIDR blocks. And that's basically, those are address blocks, IP address blocks. So you want to be familiar with how CIDR blocks are described. So for example, you have an IP address, like a 4-octet IP address, like 10.0.0.1. And then there's a slash and then some number afterwards, like between, 0 and 32 or 1 and 32. And that basically indicates the length of the number of bits that are assigned to an IP address and the number of bits that are assigned to the subnet mask. So you want to make sure you are able to read a CIDR block and understand, roughly how many bits are assigned to an IP address. Firewall rules, you need to be familiar with those. Basically, firewall rules allow you to control traffic in and out. There's ingress or inbound traffic and egress or outbound traffic rules. And rules have priorities, so you want to understand what the priorities, how to use priorities to set rules. DNS is domain name service. You have to just, again, basic understanding of that. And then also hybrid cloud. And this is a really important topic. And here the idea is that sometimes you're going to have data and workloads and jobs that run in Google Cloud, and sometimes data and jobs are going to be run on premises in your own data center or in another environment, a hosted environment, and you have to have networking between those two. So how do you set those up? What are your options? And you have to think about how much network capacity you need between your data center and the Google Cloud platform. Okay, some other services you want to know in depth. All four of the sort of the older main compute resources, Compute Engine is the virtual machine service. So when you are using Compute Engine, you can set up virtual machines. So you want to understand the basics of how to set up a VM. Also, you want to understand things like preemptible machines, which are machines that cost less, significantly less than regular virtual machines, but Google can essentially pull them back at any time. And Google will pull a VM back, a preemptible VM back within 24 hours. So it'll never run longer than 24 hours. But if you have a fault-tolerant application that can survive, having the VM taken away or crashing, then that's a great option for saving money. You also want to understand App Engine, which is Google's sort of a platform as a service. It was the original one that Google put out, and it allows you to run your applications either in a language-specific sandbox. So if you're writing in Java, for example, or Node, and you want to run something in a language-specific platform, you can do that with App Engine. Now, App Engine also, that's the standard version, by the way. App Engine also has a flexible version where you can configure your own Docker container and run it there. The other thing, another topic you really want to understand is Kubernetes Engine. That's a major part of the exam. There's a lot on Kubernetes, and Kubernetes is increasingly important. And Kubernetes Engine is basically a managed Kubernetes service. So Google will essentially create a cluster for you with your specifications and manage a lot of the internals for that. Also, Cloud Functions is important to understand. And Cloud Functions is used for event-driven processing. So if there's some event in the cloud, like somebody uploads a file into cloud storage or writes a message to Cloud PubSub, you can trigger a function to run in response to that. So Cloud Functions is good with that. Also, another compute platform is Cloud Run, which is the newer service. And it is a managed container service. So in some ways, it's like Kubernetes Engine in that you can run containers, and also a little bit like App Engine Flexible, that you can run containers there. But you have to specify very little. It really is a fully managed service. And currently, Cloud Run only works with stateless containers. So if you need to maintain state, like maintain a cache or persist data to a disk locally, you're not able to run that in Cloud Run. But if it's stateless, kind of like say a web application server typically is, then Cloud Run is a really good option for running your containers. From a storage side, the two services you really want to make sure you have a good handle on are Cloud Storage, which is the object storage system, and then also BigQuery, which is an analytical database. BigQuery is used for data warehouses and analytics and machine learning. And BigQuery uses SQL as a query language, but it's not a relational database. It's organized differently, and it's really designed for very large data sets, petabytes of scale. And also it's geared toward reading data. It's really optimized and organized for efficient query processing. Another service you want to know is Cloud PubSub. And Cloud PubSub is a messaging service. And that's used for decoupling services. So for example, you might have a web front end. And in the past, we may have written our application so that the web front end makes a call, say, to the database, and then waits for the database to finish and returns. And then the web front end continues working. The problem with that is it doesn't scale very well, because if a lot of people start using your website, your database might become essentially overwhelmed and respond very slowly. With Cloud PubSub, you can decouple those two services, the front end and the back end, and the front end can write a message, to PubSub, to something called a topic, and then the database process, when it's ready, can read that message and then perform the operation. And so we can kind of decouple these services. And that's really an important technique to enable scaling. And then finally, Stackdriver. Stackdriver is a set of services that Google acquired from a third party, a company called Stackdriver. It's recently been renamed to Cloud Monitoring and Cloud Logging, and several other services, Cloud Trace, Cloud Debug. The two that are most important are Cloud Monitoring and Cloud Logging. So monitoring helps you understand the performance aspects of your infrastructure, like a compute engine, virtual machine, and then other resources as well. So like Kubernetes engine and things like that. So cloud monitoring is definitely one you want to make sure you understand. And cloud logging is a centralized logging service. So you can send both application logs and operating system logs to cloud logging. And then you have a central place where you can search for logs. So I'm just going to take a quick sip of coffee here. Okay. Another set of questions that you will be asked are around choosing between different kinds of services. And you may get a question where you have to decide what kind of storage system to use. And the main options are Cloud SQL and Cloud Spanner. Those are relational databases. Cloud Data Store and Bigtable are both NoSQL databases. Cloud Data Store uses something called the document model. So if you're familiar with JSON and how you can have like hierarchical structures, you can have, say, key value pairs in JSON, and then you can also have like arrays or embedded JSON structures with their own sets of key value pairs. That's very similar. That's basically the kind of data structure we use with Cloud Data Store. Cloud Bigtable is a different kind of NoSQL database. It's known as a wide column database. And that's similar to Cassandra, if you've heard of Cassandra in the database world. And Bigtable is really useful when you have very large amounts of data and you need to ingest it very quickly. So for example, like an Internet of Things or IoT application where you have maybe data streaming in from sensors at very high rates and you need to capture the data and write it very quickly. Bigtable is a good option for that. I already mentioned BigQuery, which is, again, an analytical database. And anytime there's a question about, data warehouse, migrating a data warehouse, which managed service should you use, it's almost always BigQuery is the correct answer. And then cloud storage. Cloud storage is useful when you're storing files or you have archive data or you want to share data in between services. I mentioned before how we use Cloud PubSub to decouple services. Well, when we send messages from one service to another using Cloud PubSub, our message size is limited to about 10 megabytes. Now, if you need to transfer more data than that, one way to do it is to actually store the data in cloud storage as a file, and then send a link to that file as a message in Cloud PubSub. And that's one way, we can sort of work around the limit. So you could have, hundreds of gigs stored in cloud storage, and you just pass a link to that rather than trying to pass it actually in Cloud PubSub. Now, you'll also may get questions where you're asked when to use certain managed services. For example, Cloud Dataproc. Cloud Dataproc is a Google service, and it is a managed Hadoop and Spark service. So if you're running a Spark cluster on-premise and you want to migrate to Google Cloud and you want to use a managed service, Cloud Dataproc is a good option. Cloud Dataflow is a stream and batch processing service. So if you have workloads where you're ingesting data and you need to do a bunch of transformations on it and pass it to different services and do a lot of operations on it, like maybe like an ETL or extraction, transformation, and load process, where you're like loading into a data warehouse, and you have complex logic, you might want to use Cloud Dataflow for that. Data prep or Cloud Data Prep is useful for kind of exploring data and getting it ready for analysis or machine learning. Deployment Manager is a service for deploying containers, deploying your software. And then there's various developer services like Cloud Resource Repository, which is basically like a managed GitHub Bitbucket service in Google Cloud. And then Container Builder is also is useful from a build perspective. If you need to build containers regularly, we have an option for that. Okay, that is sort of a high-level overview of the structure of the questions, what kind of questions will be asked. And now what I'd like to do is kind of shift gears and take a look at some actual exam questions. But before I do that, I just want to just open it up if there are questions that people might have, like, you know, just a couple of questions before we start on the next section. I'll open it up for that.
Okay, Dan. I want to actually project something.
Oh, sure.
I want to project something, so I would actually like to give you like 1 minute.
Oh, certainly.
With your slide. To
stop
yeah,
I'll stop sharing here. There we go.
Okay, we have a contest for the JetBrains. So the contest is something I have to announce now, so that before the end of the event, we would actually get the winner. So I'll call on Ashwini, co-lead for GDG Bagalada, to come give us instructions on how to participate, on how to win the JetBrains ticket, coupon ticket for 1 year subscription. Ashwini, are you there?
Yes, I'm with you.
All right,
can you hear me?
Yes, come on.
Okay. So the 1 minute, please. Okay, so you have to post, like, just take a screenshot or a snapshot of you, like, just take a snapshot while the session is going on, and on Twitter tag your GDG. That's the GDG from. It could be Gwagwalada, Pape, maybe Lafia or Kefi, whatever GDG you are joining from. Tag them, then tag our sponsors at JetBrains and at GDG. Then use the hashtag GDG at home and hashtag Hangout with Dan. So you just tweet on Twitter and on LinkedIn. So the person with the highest amount of tweets, so you just keep tweeting. Whenever you see something, you just take a snapshot of it, tweet, just write anything you have learned and post on Twitter. So the persons with the highest amount of tweets gets to be the winner.
Okay.
So I don't even understand.
Okay, just to clear that, actually we are actually calculating the numbers of impressions. So it's very, very important for you to use those tags, because that's what you use to trace the winner. GDG at home, Hangout with Dan. Those are the two major tags you have to use. You don't have to follow any account, just the tag. So as I said, I will thank you, Ashimi. Thank you very much. So let me just brush up the instruction. So I will give the floor back to Dan. So you post a screenshot of you attending this meetup, because we actually want to make it trend. Then you tag your GDG chapter. So as he has said, can be GDG Gwagwalada, GDG Abuja, GDG Lori, GDG Mina, GDG Kefi, GSC, Efilapia, GDG Cloud, Nuremberg, whatever GDG you're part of. And if you're not sure of your GDG, just input anything. But the major thing is that they should carry the tag of GDG at home and Hangout with Dan. So the person with the highest impression, tweet impression. So your impression can even come from one tweet. It depends on your follower. So the highest person with the highest number of impression would go home with our JetBrains coupon for 1 year subscription. So that's it. And don't forget to send in your questions to the link that will be dropped for questions. So as you're dropping it, Dan would attend to that. And if you already see, if you actually notice the question that has already been asked, and you want to, that's the same thing you want to ask, you can just upvote it. That is, just like the question, so that it would rise up to the popular question. So Dan would actually know that that question is very important. You would attend to the question based on popularity. So if you see a question that you like and you want to get answers to it, just like it, upvote it, and I believe Dan would do justice to that. So and we also live on YouTube. If you have somebody that wants to join, having issues, we are live on YouTube, and the link has been dropped, so we can connect. I'll drop those links again. Thank you very much. So Dan, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was great. Good luck to everyone with the contest there. So I think what I'll do is I will share, and I'll do my whole screen, and basically I'll take a look at some of the questions so we break it up a little bit. I'll jump to this is the Hangout questions, and so here we go. I'll just do a few of these right now. Let's see. Does the Certified Associate Cloud Engineer certification expire? Yes, it does. It's 2 years that you have on that one. So yeah, every 24 months, you have to recertify. Let's see, can you recommend some companies that can recruit associate cloud engineers for a stage? Let me think about that one. I know there's a lot of demand. I don't know of companies right off the top of my head, but that's a really good question. I mean, certainly there are big companies that are have consultants, like Deloitte is an international consulting company. They hire a lot of Google engineers, but I'll try and think of some others on that one. Let's see. Oh, here's a really good question. Between the Google Associate Cloud Engineer and Amazon AWS, which one is most demand? Which one pays the best? I don't know for sure, but I think probably the Amazon AWS is probably in more demand right now because it's older. AWS is very popular. However, there are more people that know AWS. So in terms of the ratio between number of job openings and number of certified people, there's probably more Google jobs than there are, say, cloud engineers available for them. Now, in terms of which pays best, the top paying certification across just the IT industry is the Google Cloud Architect. I think this year the latest study showed the average pay for a Google Cloud Architect was about $175,000 annually. So really quite high, but it's also very hard to get the architecture certification. But the Associate Cloud Engineer is a great step toward getting the architect exam. Yeah, and those pay well. Let's see, how to deal with stress during the exam. That's another excellent question. A couple things I would recommend is, just really just kind of slowing down and just taking deep breaths when you start, and understand that you have 2 hours. So and you're answering 50 questions, you do have a good amount of time. If you find yourself like looking at a question and you can't, like your brain just is stuck, just mark it as like to review and just come back to it. You can look at a question and then come back and change your answer next time. So if at all you get stuck, I would say just move on, and just try to, if you do start to feel stressed, just remember what you want to do is focus on the question in front of you, and you don't have to think about the exam as a whole. You just want to think about the one question in front of you. And just in a few minutes, we'll take a look at some questions and how to like pick apart the answers. So that's what I would recommend. Do you recommend ACE for a computer science undergraduate currently studying in his minor year? Yes, I would say if you're studying computer science and you will be graduating soon, it's really helpful to have the associate cloud engineer, because that, in addition to your theoretical background and your academic background, it also shows you have practical skills with Google Cloud. So yes, I would definitely recommend that. How does a day in the life of a cloud engineer look? Or what's that like? That's a good question. It's like most developers. Now with the pandemic, almost all of us are working remotely. So, you know, which is fine. It works well with cloud because all the resources we work with are remote to us personally. They're all in a Google data center somewhere. But oftentimes, what you find is your day will very depend on where your focus is. So, for example, if you're do a lot of work in networking, you might find yourself spending a lot of time like setting up firewall rules, working in Cloud Console, working with some networking tools like Wireshark or something like that. If you're more focused on the data side, you might be doing things like setting up cloud buckets, giving people permission to read or write to certain buckets. You might be monitoring jobs that are loading data into a database. So almost, you know, a lot of times you're actually like working on the keyboard, you're looking at the monitor, like monitoring jobs, maybe writing some scripts or putting commands in, like debugging things that are breaking. That's often part of the day, typical day for an engineer. Let's see, what's the difference between a cloud engineer and DevOps? Which one pays the best? Really, that again is a really good question. Most of what you're doing as a cloud engineer is DevOps, at least in the sense of it's more ops or operations. So like with the cloud engineer, you're not expected to know like programming. You wouldn't be expected to write programs. In the DevOps role, if you're a DevOps engineer, you're probably also doing some level of software engineering, software development. And so again, like the architect, DevOps, you know, pays well, but it's a little more advanced. So becoming a cloud engineer and then working up to DevOps is a good way to go. And again, it's more DevOps. You probably do more programming and maybe have more focus on continuous integration and continuous deployment. So as programs, applications change, how do you get them out into production? If something goes wrong, how do you roll it back? That's kind of like what DevOps does. What kind of job experience do I need alongside ACE certification before I can get a job? I would say typically you need some kind of experience. And this is one of the hardest things about getting that first job is even if you have the certification, oftentimes people ask, well, what have you done with it? And so if you don't have a job where you can get some experience, like hands-on experience, then I would suggest doing things on your own, either working on like an open source project, like developing things in Google Cloud as part of an open source project, and that could be anything that interests you, or working with an organization like a nonprofit or volunteering for some group who you might be able to help do something like analyze data or store their data or develop an application for them or get an application running in Google Cloud for them. That's what I would recommend in terms of, in terms of getting some kind of experience. And also what I'd recommend is if you can, as you're working on things like write documentation on it so you have something to show someone, or if you're developing scripts to deploy virtual machines, or you're doing things like automatically monitoring or setting up alerts, anything like that, anything you can script, definitely put them into scripts and then set up a GitHub repository for yourself so that you can show that repository to people. Okay, I think what I'll do now is we'll come back to the questions in a little bit, and I'm going to jump back to slides. So we'll go back to, let's take a look at some of the example questions and how we can analyze them. So these are screenshots directly from the practice exam for the Associate Cloud Engineer. And what I'd like to do is just kind of walk through how I kind of reason about these things. So let's see, in this question, it asks, your project has all its compute engine resources in the Europe West 1 region, okay? And you want to set Europe West 1 as the default region for G-Cloud commands. Okay, so the service that I'm working with here is G-Cloud, and I know I'm working with the Europe West 1 region, so and it says, what should I do? Okay, so let's see. So this is about G-Cloud command. Option A is I could use Cloud Shell. Okay, so first of all, I need to understand Cloud Shell is like a very lightweight virtual machine that that I can run from a VM, like from the console directly. I don't need to spin up a virtual machine. I can actually get a very light one just by clicking on the console. So I could use Cloud Shell instead of the command line interface for your device. Well, here I know that Cloud Shell runs the command line interface, or like the G-Cloud commands. So if I'm using Cloud Shell, there's really no difference between using Cloud Shell and using the command line interface on my own device. So launching Cloud Shell after you navigate to a resource in Europe 1, it'll automatically become the default region. No, that's not the case. So, and I just, that's just not how Cloud Shell works. So that option A isn't looking likely. Let's see. Option B is use the G-Cloud config set compute / region Europe West command. Yep, to the default region. Option C is use G-Cloud set compute zone Europe West 1. Okay, so this is an example of two very answers that are very close to each other. And then the third option is creating a VPN from on-premise, creating a subnet. So, that's very complicated, and that is we should be able to eliminate that one pretty quickly, because setting up a VPN, that doesn't change your default region with the device you're working on. So it looks like here the option is going to be either B or C. So now I want to look at, well, what's the difference between B and C? And the only difference is that in B, we're using a G-Cloud command to set something at a region level, and option C is setting something at the zone level. But going back to the question, I can see I'm talking about, I want to set something to the Europe West region 1. So in that case, I would want to choose option B, because that's the correct answer. So even if you didn't know right away that that was the correct answer, you can kind of start picking apart the various options and identifying which ones sound reasonable and which ones are really kind of off the mark. So that's one example. Here's another one. You've developed a new application for App Engine. Okay, so we're talking about App Engine, and App Engine is a platform as a service, and there's two types of App Engine. There's standard and flexible, so I just want to keep that in mind. You're ready to deploy it to production. You need to estimate the cost of running your application on Google Cloud Platform as accurately as possible. Okay, so this is about, how much is this going to cost? I have to be able to estimate that. What should you do? Okay, so this is really a question about understanding what services are available in Google Cloud to help you estimate the cost of using those resources. And there's a cost calculator. So if you're familiar with Google Cloud, you would know that that's an option. So let's take a look at the options here. First, A is create a YAML file with expected uses, patch this to the G-Cloud app estimate command to get an accurate estimation. Okay, I've never heard of G-Cloud app estimate. That might exist, but I'm going to leave that for now. I'm going to assume that's not the correct one. Option B is multiply the cost of your application when it is in development by the number of expected users to get an accurate estimation. Okay, no, that's obviously incorrect, because the way you use something in development isn't necessarily necessarily tied, or there's not necessarily a linear relationship between how you use it in development and how you will use it in production. So this idea of having like a simple rule of thumb like that is almost certainly wrong. Option C is use the pricing calculator for Op Engine to get an accurate estimate of the expected charges. Okay, that sounds like a reasonable one. Or D, create a ticket with Google Cloud billing support to get an accurate estimation. That doesn't sound reasonable. If for no other reason, you almost never need to create a ticket with Google Cloud. The one time you may need to contact Google support, or likely, is if you hit your resource limits. So for example, there's for your account, you'll be allocated or limited to a certain number of virtual machines running at any one time, or a certain amount of persistent storage in attached storage. If you hit that limit, then that's a time where you would contact Google and basically request an increase in your limit. But other than that, I can't think of another time where you would contact Google support, and certainly not for something as simple as doing a cost estimate. So here, the correct answer is C. And the way we know that, you simply have to know that the pricing calculator exists, and also that there isn't something, a G-Cloud command called G-Cloud app estimate. And you would probably be able to guess that if you are familiar with the G-Cloud app command. So the G-Cloud app command is really more about creating applications, deploying them, rolling out new versions, and things like that. Table can handle petabytes of data pretty easily. Now, the data needs to be written and changed at high speed. Okay, well, probably not BigQuery then, because BigQuery isn't designed for updating data. Typically, you write it once and leave it, and that's it. You're not modifying the data. So now I'm starting to think Bigtable. Now, you want the most performance storage option for your data. Which product should you use? Okay, so I want something that's really high performance. Cloud Data Store. Cloud Data Store is a document database, really not well suited for time series data. You could use it, but it's probably, Cloud Data Store is not a great option for petabyte scale databases. Cloud storage certainly can handle petabytes, because you can pretty much store as much data as you have. You can store it in cloud storage. However, it's not very performant in that it's longer latency. Also, cloud storage isn't designed for high speed writing, so low latency writing. And also changing the data. Cloud storage doesn't sound like a good option. Cloud Bigtable definitely seems like an option. Cloud Bigtable is often used with IoT and time series data. It can certainly handle several petabytes of data. And it's also very good at writing data at low latency. So that looks like a good option. And then finally, BigQuery. Well, it can certainly store time series data, and it can certainly handle several petabytes of data. But writing data at very high speeds, no, that's not so great, and definitely not for anything that would require changes. So the correct answer there is Bigtable. So again, that's just another example of how to kind of take apart a question and think about what are the strengths of each service and what are their weaknesses, and how well does that fit with the set of technical requirements that you have in front of you in the question. Okay, let's take a look at another one. Okay, here we say, we have a definition for an instance template that contains a web application. Okay, and if we have an instance template, that means we're talking about virtual machines. And so we're probably going to be setting up virtual machines with this web application. You're asked to deploy the application so that it can scale based on HTTP traffic it receives. What should you do? Okay, so here's a scenario where we have a web application, and let's say we have it running on one virtual machine. And in this scenario, we want to know, what if the traffic starts increasing and we get a lot more use? And now we want to, say, spin up another 1 or 2 virtual machines. What's the best way to do that? Okay, so let's see. Well, one of these 4 options is going to be correct. So let's see which one seems like the best answer. So it's option A is create a VM from the instance template. Okay, create an image from that VM disk, export the image to cloud storage, and then create an HTTP load balancer and add the cloud storage bucket as its backend service. Okay, well, let's think about that one. There's a lot of steps here. Creating a VM from the instance template seems like it's a reasonable thing to do. Now, creating a custom image from the VM and then exporting it to a cloud storage, that does not seem like something you should have to do if you're like automatically adding more, say, servers to a cluster. So this is starting to sound suspicious, like it's not going to work. Now, creating an HTTP load balancer, that sounds like something we would want. And then add a cloud storage bucket as its backend service. No, there's no indication that we need cloud storage bucket as a backend service. So option A does not look like a viable option. So let's move on from that one. Let's see, option B is create a VM from the instance template, create an App Engine application in automatic scaling mode that forwards all traffic to the VM. Well, okay, now App Engine is for running applications. We wouldn't want to create an application that simply forwards traffic to the VM. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So option B is almost certainly incorrect because, you know, traffic management and things like that is not what App Engine is used for. So there's a good example where you have a service and you're using it for something that it was not designed for. So that's also a good option, you know, a good way of detecting an option that's not likely the correct answer. In option B, in option A, there was talk about using cloud storage bucket as a backend service. Well, cloud storage buckets aren't services, they're not backend. So there's another example of using something in a way that it's not designed for. Also in option A, this is an example of having an extra technical requirement like cloud storage bucket as a backend service. There's no mention of backend services. So that's another reason option A is probably not a viable answer. So let's look at option C. Create a managed instance group based on the instance template. Okay, that sounds reasonable because managed instance groups are sets of virtual machines that run in Compute Engine, and they all run the same. They're basically identical. Any member of the instance group is exactly the same as anything else, and they're created from an instance template. So far, that sounds like a reasonable option. There's no reason to throw this option out. Configure auto-scaling based on HTTP traffic. Okay, that sounds reasonable, because when you have an instance group, you also have a load balancer in front that's going to direct traffic. And configure the instance group as the back-end service of the HTTP load balancer. Okay, that makes sense. So the back-end service for the load balancer, that makes a lot of sense. So the load balancer is going to distribute traffic, and we're going to configure the auto-scaling for the instance group, and that makes sense. So that the instances will be added or removed based on HTTP traffic. So that satisfies one of the requirements there. And we're setting up a managed instance group, which is, that's a good practice in Google Cloud, and we're using the instance template. So option C is so far it looks like the best option. But let's take a look at option D. Option D is create the necessary amount of instances required for peak user traffic based on the instance template. Okay, right away that's suspicious, because one of the great reasons we move to the cloud is that we can auto scale up and down very easily. If we need more resources, we can go get them. One of the difficulties when you work with on-premises infrastructure is that oftentimes you find you have to purchase enough hardware to handle peak load, even though you're not always using those resources. So creating the necessary amount of number of instances that you would require for peak load doesn't make a lot of sense in the cloud. So this option's not looking good. And then next it says create an unmanaged instance group. Okay, wait a minute. unmanaged instance groups do not work with templates. And unmanaged instance groups are only used when the servers in that group are heterogeneous. There's something different about them. And in general, it's not recommended to use a managed instance group unless you're migrating some kind of cluster from on-premise to Google Cloud, and the members of that cluster are heterogeneous. So generally, we don't use unmanaged instance groups, and the fact that this option is saying start with a peak, enough infrastructure to handle your peak load, and use something that's generally not recommended, almost certainly this is going to be the wrong answer. And then finally, configuring the instance group as the back end of an HTTP load balancer. Okay, that's a reasonable thing. So here, clearly the answer is C, because we're working with managed instance group, which is a recommended thing. We're auto-scaling, which takes advantage of a feature that's enabled with load balancing and instance groups. And we want to configure the instance group as the back end for the load balancer. That makes sense. So that's how we would get to option C. Again, we kind of eliminate options where one of the services like App Engine is being used for something it's not really designed for. Option D is eliminated because it's using a practice like configuring as much infrastructure as you'll need for peak performance. That's not a recommended practice, so that looks suspicious. And using an unmanaged instance group, that looks suspicious. And then finally, we eliminated A again because there's a lot of extra work like creating images of disks and moving them to cloud storage and using cloud storage as a backend. That doesn't sound reasonable. So again, that's how we end up at option C. All right, let's look at another one. Here we have an application, and we're working with a large international audience. Now we're running stateless virtual machines in a managed instance group across multiple locations. Okay, this all sounds like good practices. One feature of the application lets users upload files and share them with other users. Okay, anytime I see something where we have a large audience and it's international and we're allowing users to upload something, well, we're either going to have to limit severely the size of that, or we're going to start thinking about cloud storage because it grows without bound. So let's think about that. So we let users upload files and share them with other users. The files must be available for 30 days. After that, they're removed from the system entirely. So which storage solution would you choose? Well, okay, let's think about this. So we're working with files. So files are often stored in an object system, but let's see. We could use a cloud data store database. Well, cloud data store is a NoSQL database. It's used for document structures, which again are like JSON structures. So that's probably not a great option for storing files. So let's move on to B, a multi-regional cloud storage bucket. Well, okay, that looks like a good option because cloud storage can handle storing files, like arbitrary size files. So that's good. Files must be available for 30 days, and after that, they're removed from the system. Well, cloud storage supports lifecycle policies. So I could create a cloud storage bucket. Okay, after 30 days, delete any files or any objects in this bucket. So cloud storage would fit well with that requirement. And the fact that it's multi-regional, that fits well with the large international audience. So regardless of where people are in the world, by using a multi-regional bucket, they'll get pretty good performance. As opposed to, say, having a regional bucket, say, in the Europe zone, then, say, somebody in North America or Southeast Asia, they wouldn't get necessarily as good a performance as somebody in Europe or Africa might get. So, okay, so multiple region, that looks like, that's addressing some of the implied requirements here. Another option is to use persistent SSDs on virtual machine instances. Well, this isn't a great option for a couple of reasons. One, SSDs are expensive. That's probably the costliest of all of the storage options. So if I want to keep my costs down, probably persistent SSDs isn't a good option. Also, persistent SSDs are attached to virtual machines. So we would have to be running virtual machines just simply to store these files. So that would add cost. And we'd have to scale up the number of virtual machines based on the number of files or the amount of file storage that's needed. Because there's going to be a maximum amount of data that we can store per virtual machine. And so that's not nearly as good an option as using cloud storage. Because with cloud storage, we don't have to worry about maximum disk size and things like that. So option C is not looking as good as option B. And then finally, option D, managed instance group of file store servers. Okay, this is wrong for a couple of reasons. One, the managed instance group is a set of virtual machines, and we already decided like option C isn't a good option because there's more overhead than needed. We don't need to manage virtual machines for this. So that's not looking good. Now also, file store is a service itself, and it's a file system, like a network file system. And there's no requirements for having like file system access or needing like a file system for like creating a database file or being able to do like file system commands. So file store probably isn't a good option either. And that leaves us with B as the multi-regional cloud storage bucket as being the best option for this particular set of requirements. Okay, we have another one. Here we're working with creating a Kubernetes engine cluster, and we're going to be deploying multiple pods inside the cluster. So pods is a logical abstraction in Kubernetes engine. And let's see, all the container logs must be stored in BigQuery for later analysis. You want to follow Google recommended practices. Which two approaches can you take? Okay, so here we're working with Kubernetes engine. We're talking about logging, and we want to be able to store the logs in BigQuery. So a couple things we want to think about. Stackdriver logging, or cloud logging as it's now called. We're probably going to use that. And BigQuery is used with cloud logging. And in fact, there is a mechanism called a sync, which allows you to essentially move data pretty easily from cloud logging or Stackdriver logging into BigQuery. So we're probably going to need that at some point. So let's see. So we want to do things like turn on Stackdriver logging during the Kubernetes engine, during Kubernetes engine cluster creation. Okay, we're definitely going to want to have Stackdriver logging available. Let's think about that one. Turn on Stackdriver monitoring during Kubernetes engine cluster creation. Well, definitely turning on monitoring and having monitoring available is definitely a useful thing, but it's not necessarily required. Let's hold off on committing to that one. Develop a custom add-on that uses Cloud Logging API and the BigQuery API. Okay, that looks suspicious. Why would I need to write a custom add-on for something as simple as using Cloud Logging with Kubernetes? And then the next part of that is deploy the add-on on your Kubernetes engine cluster. Again, that sounds like a lot of extra work, and one would think that Google would provide some mechanism for using cloud logging and BigQuery a little more easily than writing a custom application. So option C is suspicious. Let's see. Option D is use the Stackdriver logging export feature to create a sync to cloud storage, create a cloud data flow job that imports the log files from cloud storage to BigQuery. Okay, that might be it. Definitely creating a sync to cloud storage sounds reasonable, and then creating cloud data flow job that imports log files. Okay, that's the kind of thing that data flow is used for. And certainly loading from cloud storage to BigQuery makes sense, but let's hold off and see if there's a better option. And then the other option is to use Stackdriver logging export feature to create a sync to BigQuery. Okay, that seems reasonable. Specify a filter expression to export logs related to your Kubernetes cluster only. Okay, so there are a number of options here, but definitely the best options are one, turning on Stackdriver logging. Definitely we want that because we want to use Stackdriver logging. And then finally, the other thing is, choosing between option D and E. Option E is the better choice because it has fewer steps. So we're not managing a data flow job or storing data directly in cloud storage and managing it ourselves. So the best option is using Stackdriver logging and then exporting to a BigQuery sync. Now, to answer this correctly, you have to understand how logging works in the sense that you have logging has syncs that go to like BigQuery and to cloud storage. So here it's important to just understand the features of cloud logging. That's how we were able to sort of pick apart this question. Oh, another thing you'll notice as you're answering questions in the exam, if there is a square box like this, there are checkboxes next to the answers. That means it's going to be a question where you can have multiple answers, as opposed to, say, something here where you have the circle option. That means you're going to be only choosing one. Okay, let's see. I think we've got, going to give that one away. You have an application server running on Compute Engine. Okay, it's in Europe West 1 D zone. Okay, so it's in one particular zone. You need to ensure high availability and replicate the server to Europe West 2 C zone using the fewest possible steps. What would you do? Okay, well, let's think about this. We could create a snapshot from the disk. That seems reasonable. Create a disk from the snapshot in Europe West 2 C zone, and then create a VM with that disk. Okay. Or you could create a snapshot from the disk, create a disk from the snapshot in the Europe West 1D zone, and then move the disk to Europe West 2 C zone to create a VM with that disk. Okay, that sounds reasonable because we have to have the disk in that particular zone. Option C is use gcloud to copy the disk to Europe West 2C and then create a VM with that disk. Okay, well, you don't really copy disks using gcloud, so that's looking kind of like not a great answer. Option D is use gcloud compute instance move with a parameter destination zone. Well, cloud compute instance command, I'm going to eliminate D at that point. So my best options are probably A and B. And the best option is actually A, which is basically, the minimal number of steps is creating the disk from the snapshot and then creating a VM from that disk. Okay, here's another one. Your company has a mission critical application that serves users globally. Okay, you need to select a transactional relational data storage system for this application. Which two products should you consider? on how it's configured. It is transactional, and it is really scalable transactional relational database. So Cloud Spanners definitely looks like a good option. Cloud Bigtable can support users globally, but it's not fully transactional. There are different levels of transaction. With Bigtable, it's not sort of transactional in a relational sense. Now, so I'm going to possibly eliminate it, but definitely it's not a relational storage system. So we're going to eliminate Bigtable for that reason. And Cloud Data Store is also not a relational database system. So our best options here, and we have to pick two. So the only two that are both relational data storage systems are Cloud SQL and Cloud Spanner. So that's how we sort of pick that answer. Here we have what looks like a question about Kubernetes. We have a Cloud Kubernetes cluster with one node pool. So we have to understand, here we have to be familiar with Kubernetes and the architecture here. So we understand node pool is an abstraction. And basically within a Kubernetes cluster, a node pool is a set of nodes that are all configured the same and typically used for the same kind of workloads. Now the cluster receives a lot of traffic and needs to grow. You decide to add a node. What should you use? Okay, let's see, we could use the gcloud container cluster resize with the desired number of nodes. We could use kubectl container cluster resize with desired number of nodes. We could edit the managed instance group of the cluster. Okay, well, managed instance groups are part of Compute Engine, and Kubernetes Engine actually implements the cluster using virtual machines that are managed in Compute Engine. So yeah, there's definitely going to be managed instance groups, and they're going to be, we could manipulate them from Compute Engine, but we wouldn't want to directly start manipulating virtual machines that Kubernetes Engine creates on our behalf. So option C is looking suspicious. Option D, edit the managed instance group of the cluster and enable auto-scaling. Well, no, I mean, Kubernetes probably would already use auto-scaling if that was a reasonable thing to do for the instance group. So options C and D are definitely not correct, because we don't want to go messing with the infrastructure that Kubernetes Engine manages. So now it comes down to a question of, well, is it a gcloud command or a kubectl command? And since what we're doing is we're working with nodes in the sense of we want to resize the cluster, that means it's almost certainly a gcloud command. And here we have to understand the difference of when do you use gcloud command and when do you use kubectl commands. And kubectl is used to manage like the internal parts of a Kubernetes cluster. And so actually the correct answer here would be to use the gcloud container cluster resize command. Okay, here's another example. I think we're coming close to the end of the example questions here. Here we want to create and update your application for App Engine. You want to deploy the updated version without impacting your users. And you want to be able to roll back as quickly as possible as it fails. So what should you do? Okay, well, option A is delete the current version of your application and deploy the update using the same version identifier as the deleted version. Well, if we delete our application and then deploy something, we're going to be disrupting or impacting our users. So option A is looking like not a great option. Option B is notify users of upcoming maintenance window and then deploy the update in that maintenance window. No, well, if we have to tell our users about a maintenance window, then we're definitely impacting them. So again, B is not looking like a great option. Option C is deploy the update as the same version that's currently running. Well, okay, that wouldn't impact users, at least not directly in the sense of it's not disrupting them, we're not notifying them of a maintenance window. But option D is deploy the update as a new version and then migrate traffic from the current version to the new version. Well, that looks like a good option for a number of reasons. One, we can start migrating small amounts of traffic. So if something goes wrong, we can roll it back, and we're only adversely affecting a small number of users. So that's actually the best option. Anytime with App Engine, where you can roll out a new version and then slowly test it out, that's called a canary deploy. And so, that's a good option right there. So in this case, we're eliminating the first two options, A and B, pretty quickly because they don't fit with one of the requirements, which is not impacting the users. And option C we eliminate because it's not as good an option for being able to roll back. So that's in that case, we're left with option D as the best choice. So that wraps up the discussion on the test questions and how to use them. So I just want to share this link, this bit.ly link. If you would like to kind of learn more about Google Cloud and the Associate Cloud Engineer exam in particular, this is a link to my Udemy course. And you don't have to take the course, like finish the course in the next couple of days, but you simply need to sign up. And then once you go in and sign up for the course, then you'll have lifetime access to it. But here's the expiration time and date on that coupon. So we've got a couple of days. So again, feel free to share this with other people as well. As many people can sign up as possible over the next couple of days. The only thing that I ask is if you do sign up for the course and take the course, if you could just leave a star rating on the course. The higher the average star rating, the more likely Udemy is to promote this and share this with other people. So it would help me get the word out about this course. If you were to rate the course, I would appreciate it. But again, feel free to share it. Also, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn ID is Dan Sullivan PDX. Yeah, I'd love to connect with you, and that's a great way. If you follow me on LinkedIn, I often post on LinkedIn like guides or tips on passing the exam or resources for passing a lot of the certification exams. And also, if I'm have the ability to give away free courses and things like that, I always post that. Anytime I do that, I post that on LinkedIn. So you're welcome to join me there. Okay, I'm going to leave this up for just a little bit, and I'll again want to go back to questions. So I am going to jump back from here and go back to the questions. Let's see if I've got my window open. And here we are with some questions. And I'll just make sure I refresh to make sure I have the latest ranking. Okay, let's see. I'll jump into some more questions here. And feel free now, this is the very informal part. If you have questions or people want to discuss things, now's a great time to do that. Let's see, I've answered those. What kind of experience? Let's see, do you have any mnemonic tips for Associate Cloud Engineer students? That I don't. No, there's no. Yeah, I'm afraid I don't. Yeah, that's a great idea to have mnemonics for various things. I haven't come across anything with Google exams where that would be helpful. How should you organize in order to succeed with regards to the ACE exam? I would say that goes back to what I was talking about in the beginning, which is to, first of all, look at the exam guide and identify areas that you are like strong in and weak in. And I would say prioritize your studying to make sure you focus, cover your weak areas, but also review for your strong areas as well. And I would just set up a study guide where you basically map out which topics you're going to work on, like on a particular day or over a particular week. And I would say for each of those topics, review the material in the Udemy course. If you have access to the official study guide, the book, I would say review the topics there. And then also use the Google documentation. The Google documentation is really good. And for each of the services, Google has a concept guide or a concept overview. I would definitely read the concept overview for each of the services that you might be tested on. So that's how I would organize. I would identify my areas that I'm weak on and strong on, prioritize my study of those, and then use the Udemy course, hands-on work, and then the concept guide and the documentation as a basis for learning those particular topics. Okay, in some countries, the internet connection is unstable. Can we still efficiently study as a cloud engineer or work as a cloud engineer in that kind of a country? That would be difficult. That is a difficult challenge. And unfortunately, having reliable internet connection is pretty important. I would suggest trying as much as possible, but that is a challenge. And I don't have any good suggestions for being able to work around that. Let's see. If I did both associate cloud and cloud architecture at the same time, is both certificates going to expire at the same time? Yes, I think the expiration date is exactly like 2 years after the exam. So whenever you take the exam, it'll be 2 years after that the exam will expire, or the certification will expire. Let's see, any career path advice and untapped positions for an individual pursuing a master's in medical biotech and growing skills in cloud computing? Oh, that's great. So yeah, that's great. A master's in medical biotech is an excellent field. I also did work in life sciences and biotech. So I think cloud is a great set of skills to have if you're working in any kind of biotech. So I would just follow the general advice in terms of acquiring skills. For biotech, I would also highly recommend making sure you just understand like Kubernetes and also cloud data flow for manipulating data, and some of the machine learning services that are available in Google Cloud are highly relevant in the biotech area. Hello, I want to know if cloud engineer can work full-time at home and don't have to go out. Oftentimes, yes, I think the pandemic has really changed the way a lot of us work. And so, yeah, a lot of the work I do right now is remote, and I do, almost all of my work in the cloud. So yes, it is possible to do a lot of the work remotely. Let's see, can you please provide us with hints on how to understand, debug, master, and answer questions correctly on command lines in G-Cloud Shell SSH if you're completely new to it? Yes, okay. So one thing I would, one way I remember G-Cloud commands are that you can break them up into parts. So the commands typically start with G-Cloud, and then it's the name of a service like container or compute or app. And so it's G-Cloud, then the name of the service, and then let's see if I can find an example here. We had one. I'm trying to think where I could get a good example of G-Cloud commands. Let me just see. G-Cloud command list. An example of a G-Cloud command list. Going back to the documentation, because it's easier, because it's easier if I can show you examples. Let's see if I can. Here's a command line tool cheat sheet. Sorry, it's taking a little bit of time to come up here. Let's see if I can find exams. G-Cloud compute instances. Well, here, for example, is G-Cloud compute instances. What you have is the G-Cloud command followed by the services, and then the resource you're working with. So in this case, it's instances. So you might do like a G-Cloud compute instances, and then there's some operation that applies to those. Like you might start a G-Cloud command, Sorry, I'm trying to find a list here. Can't find one. But yeah, basically the idea is just remember that it's always G-Cloud followed by the service and then the thing that you're working on, like app or compute, or within compute, it's something like instances, and then the operation on it. So those are sort of the 4 parts: G-Cloud, service, the thing that you're working on, the resource, and then what you're doing to it. That would be the one thing I would recommend for that. Let's see, what would be expected of me at an entry-level cloud engineering exam? How do I go about preparing and applying for jobs in the cloud engineer? Okay, so as a cloud engineer, you would be expected to know how to use the Google Cloud Console to create resources, like create virtual machines or start a Kubernetes cluster, or be able to diagnose problems with an application, like use cloud monitoring and cloud logging. You'd also be probably expected to have some familiarity with some of the managed services like Cloud Dataproc for starting up Spark clusters. And then how about preparing for that? I would say definitely practice on your own. It's great if you can have specific projects in mind. So for example, if you're volunteering with an organization, you might be developing applications for them or helping them run applications. That's a great way to get some practice. Let's see, how different is the cloud architect compared to cloud associate engineer exam? That's a really important question. The cloud architect exam covers a similar material. There would probably be, you'd probably see fewer questions on like what G-Cloud command would you use to do X? And there would be more questions about how you would design a system that, say, combines multiple services, like cloud storage, cloud data flow, and BigQuery. There might be architecture, there would be questions on the architecture exam that would require you to understand all 3 of those services and how they work together and in what situations you would use them. At the associate engineer exam, it's much more focused on doing specific tasks as opposed to designing things. Let's see, between cloud architect and data science, which one is a job that lasts the longest and which one pays the best? That's difficult. I'd say the pay is probably comparable. The cloud architect might pay more right now. I would say, which is best long-term really depends on your interest. If you like working with data and machine learning and understanding data, then data scientist is a great role. If you like designing things, like designing systems and figuring out how to optimize systems, then cloud architect's a really good, a good option. From my studies on Pluralsight, I discovered some subjects are not covered in the exam guide, most especially Anthos. Please talk on this. Okay, that's good to know. Yep, Anthos is new, and it is a service that allows you to manage Kubernetes across different clouds. So for example, you could have Kubernetes clusters running in Google Cloud, in AWS, and in on-premises. Anthos is a service that allows you to manage those, and it's fairly new. Yeah, it's not covered yet. Actually, one of the things I will be doing shortly is updating the Associate Cloud Engineer to include videos on Anthos and Cloud Run. So hopefully within about 3 weeks or so, there will be material on Anthos in the Udemy course. And feel free to ping me on LinkedIn, like send me a question if you don't see it in a few weeks. Kind of just send me a message on LinkedIn and prompt me, and I'll let you know what's up with the schedule there. Can we please get the Udemy link? Okay, I shared that one. And reading your book and practicing questions, would that be enough for passing certification? No, nope, absolutely not. And none of these things, not the Coursera course, not Pluralsight, not Udemy, no book or combination of book and course will be enough to pass the exam. You actually have to work with Google Cloud. And I would suggest, expect to spend, say, like 40 hours of time working on the Google Cloud directly, working with different services before you pass. Which is better, ACE, Associate Cloud Engineer, or professional cloud architect to get certified. They're really different. The associate cloud engineer is designed for somebody who has entry-level experience with Google Cloud, maybe several months. Google expects people taking the professional cloud architect exam to have about 3 years of experience in the cloud. So maybe not necessarily with Google Cloud, but maybe with AWS. But the cloud architect is a very difficult exam, and it really taxes you. It requires you to understand how to design systems in the cloud and understand distributed systems and how to design for scalability and reliability. So if you're just getting started with Google Cloud, or you've worked with Google Cloud, say, for less than a year, then I would definitely suggest going for the cloud engineer first. Does it make sense to go for similar certifications by cloud providers once you've cleared ACE or PCA for Google? Do you agree with this strategy? Yes, again, it depends on what you want to do. If you would like to work across clouds, like sometimes work in AWS and sometimes work in Google Cloud, then definitely it makes sense to have certifications in both. I would say it's probably easier to get the AWS architect, associate architect, pass that exam than it is to pass the Google Cloud architect. There are other exams. I'm not familiar with all the latest exams in AWS, but definitely getting a mix of certifications might be a good idea if you want to work across them. I will say it's more important to have, or it would be better to have fewer certifications and more hands-on experience than a lot of certifications and not a lot of actual experience with the cloud. I think a lot of people who are hiring wonder how somebody could have, a bunch of Google Cloud certifications and a bunch of AWS certifications. How much they really know, be able to do day-to-day work if they haven't also had hands-on experience. So my suggestion is don't worry so much about the number of certifications you have as much as getting certifications and having a lot of experience using Google Cloud or AWS in that particular area, whatever the area is covered by that certification exam. Can you please explain the difference between a container and a VM? Okay, so yes, and that's an important concept. And basically, a virtual machine is an abstraction, and within a virtual machine runs on a physical server. So, for example, you might have a physical server, and it's running something called a hypervisor, and a hypervisor means like VMware. And what the hypervisor allows you to do is to create these things called virtual machines. And each virtual machine has its own operating system. And the hypervisor allows the virtual machine to make calls to the hardware and use some of the hardware resources. And so with virtual machines, you're sharing the hardware. And so a virtual machine runs on a server. It requires a hypervisor. And when you run a virtual machine, you also install an operating system. And so virtual machines are good because they allow you to literally run multiple operating systems with different configurations and different workloads on the same physical hardware. However, each virtual machine has to run its own operating system. So there's a lot of overhead. So a while ago, Google and other folks started working on this idea of containers, which is containers are a more lightweight virtual machine-like mechanism, which instead of requiring you to run a separate operating system, a container allows you to safely use some subset of operating systems resources like memory and disk and CPU without having to install a copy of the operating system yourself. So you can run many more containers on the same physical hardware than you could virtual machine. So containers are much more efficient when you can use them. And once people developed containers like Docker containers, then what people realized was boy, it's really difficult to keep track of, all these tens or hundreds of containers. And so they developed a platform called Kubernetes for orchestrating or for managing all those containers. So Kubernetes is what we use for managing containers. And we run those containers in clusters. And so Kubernetes manages those clusters. So that's basically the difference between containers and VMs. VMs are not as efficient, and so containers kind of came along afterwards as a more efficient alternative. Let's see, can you please give us links to open source projects that we can offer our service to after we get the certificate? Let me think about that. I don't know some off the top of my head, but I will think about that and try and share some of those. Do we need to learn some programming language to be an efficient Google Cloud engineer? No, you don't, but it is helpful to understand a little bit of programming, and the one I would recommend is Python. That's certainly the most useful. Can you throw some light on the newest certification exam, Cloud ML Engineer Certification? Just a little bit. I probably don't know much more than you do about it at this point. It's similar to the Cloud Data Engineer exam, but there's more focus on machine learning. So in terms of resources, if you were to study for that, I would suggest using the Cloud Data Engineer Study Guide, which is available now. I'm finishing up a Cloud Data Engineering Udemy course, which should be available in a few weeks on Udemy. That would be probably the best resource for that at this point. That and Coursera courses specifically on machine learning. Let's see, how to convince a company to move to the cloud. Boy, that's a very long discussion. I would say, basically the idea is cloud, the big advantage of cloud is that you don't have to invest in a lot of hardware. So you're not investing your capital in hardware. You're not spending a lot of money to have people manage physical hardware. So cloud is much more efficient. So that would be the main reason. Other than that, I would suggest, I would suggest Googling Harvard Business Review and cloud advantages. That you'd probably find some studies from the Harvard Business School on that. Any updates on Berlin Transport UI frames? No, I'm sorry, I don't have any information on that. That's not something I'm familiar with. How can I get access to cloud commands? When you can sign up on Google by just going to Google Cloud. If you literally search for Google Cloud sign up free, it'll get you a link. You just need an email address. I don't believe you need a credit card to sign up for it, at least to get initial access. And then you can start exploring, start working with Google commands using the Cloud Console. Let's see, I would like to build a mobile app, simple backend API in GCP. How would I set up the environment? I'm assuming I'll host a website on API in GCP. Probably the easiest way is to use the backend would be like App Engine, put it into a container. If you're doing mobile app, if you want to do like synchronizing data, I would suggest looking at Firebase, which is a service which is designed specifically for supporting mobile apps. Any idea when the cloud certification will be available again? Oh, developer certification. Oh, I don't know. I assume you mean, will it be available like online because the test centers are closed? That I don't know. Have you witnessed any trends toward remote jobs and specifically in the cloud? Yeah, basically everything is remote. Actually, I switched jobs since starting the pandemic, and I've been completely remote working at my job. In fact, all my interviews were remote. All my cloud work is remote. So yeah, there's definitely a trend toward it. And I think even once the pandemic is over, or we, as we learn to live with the pandemic, I imagine there's going to be, continuing to be more remote work, which is a great advantage because what that means is it doesn't matter where you live. I live on the West Coast of the United States, but I work with people literally all over the world. In my last job, there were people literally in you know, across 3 continents working together. And so I think there's going to be more and more of that. Let's see, sharing links. Yep, happy legitimate. Share the links. Sure, be happy to. Any courses taken online, either from Udemy or other programs, they can use any country to apply for the job. Yeah, again, I would suggest Coursera. Again, because the courses there are free. Pluralsight, somebody mentioned they have some good courses there. I would also suggest, you know, there's a lot of courses on Udemy in addition to the ones that I've done. I would recommend those. Let's see, what does Cloud Data Store, if anything, to do with MongoDB? Oh, really excellent question. Cloud Data Store is similar to MongoDB. So they're both document databases. Cloud Data Store is a managed database. So unlike with MongoDB, if you wanted to use Mongo, you'd have to like set up a server for it, manage replications, manage backups, things like that. Cloud Data Store manages all that for you. So you can simply just use the Cloud Data Store like API and just put your data in there. You don't actually have to manage the database. So I use Cloud Data Store for one of my projects. I could have used MongoDB, but I don't want to manage servers and things like that. So that's the difference there. Let's see. Is there any way of getting a PDF version off Google Docs? I don't know, other than just printing. Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't seen that. Talked a little bit about the engineering exam. Sharing links, sharing links. Is there a link to get an initial free offer to the Google Cloud Access? Yes. Let me go back to my slides here. And I think I've got it here. There is a link. I believe it's cloud.google.com/free. So that's the one you probably want to take a look at. And let's see, jump back to Chrome. And let's see, can you change the reason to GCP Cloud Bucket? If yes, how? No, I don't think so. I'd have to look that up, but you can create another bucket and copy it over, or copy your contents over. I believe that's what you would have to do. And then what are the role of nodes and how do they relate to Kubernetes? Oh, okay. Nodes is basically like a server in Kubernetes. Kubernetes manages virtual machines. So a node is basically like is implemented as like a virtual machine in Kubernetes. It could be just a physical server, not necessarily a virtual machine, but it's literally a node is where you would run containers. So in Kubernetes engine, if you create a 3-node cluster, there will be 3 virtual machines created in Compute Engine, and they'll all be part of a managed instance group. So nodes are basically the ways we refer to like servers, and that's where pods run. Pods are a way of encapsulating containers, and that's where they run. And yeah, Kubernetes is a complicated subject, and that's definitely worth taking a course on, like on Coursera. How do I know any cloud native certification program? I don't know. I'm trying to think. Was it the Open Cloud? Yeah, I don't know of any. That one. Sorry, I seem to have lost my place here. Yeah. There we go. Cloud data. What's the difference between Cloud Data Store versus Cloud Firestore? Okay. Cloud Firestore has a different back end. Cloud Firestore, they're basically different storage engines. And when you work with Cloud Data Store, you can have a Cloud Data Store version or a Cloud Firestore backend. Cloud Firestore is better if you're doing like mobile applications and you're going to need like large numbers of connections to the database. Cloud Firestore is a better option. If you're doing sort of a more traditional backend server, like web application, and you're using just like a traditional document store that you might use like MongoDB for, that data store is a better option. Can we please get more practice exam questions somewhere? Let's see, on the Udemy course that I'm giving out, there is one practice exam. If you have access to the official study guide book, there are 2 exams there with 100 questions. And then there's also the practice test. And then there are folks who sell practice exams on both like Amazon and Udemy. I don't know how good they are. I've never seen any of them. You know, I hope someday to be able to develop some additional questions, but I just haven't gotten around to it. Yeah, and the data center. How's Cloud File Store different from Firestore? Oh, okay. Firestore is a database. It's a NoSQL database, and it uses a document model, so it's like the JSON structure. Cloud File Store is like a file system, so it has like directories and you have directories with files in them, and you can have like directory structures, recursive structures. So File Store is basically like a network file system, and Firestore is a database. Yeah, and it's important. Names in Google, their services are sometimes so similar, it's hard to keep track of them. So, all right, I believe that is all the questions. So thank you for participating. I've really enjoyed this. Again, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. If you have additional questions, I'll just stop sharing in case any of the leaders might like to take it over from here. I think that's all that I have. And thank you again. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.
Thank you so much, Dan. I appreciate you, and we really thank you for this wonderful privilege. This actually is a lifetime opportunity to actually get to have a session with you. I just want to thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know how to thank you, but just thank you. Thank you, Dan.
Oh, well, thank you. And I appreciate all the work you did to put this together. I understand running meetups and developer groups is quite a bit of work. So I really appreciate all the work you've put into this. And yeah, and I think it's great that you are considering Google Cloud and investing the time to learn this. I really do think it's a great career move. I've worked in a lot of different platforms and things, and definitely Google Cloud is my preferred place to work. So you know, feel free to contact me also about other like career questions or anything like that. It doesn't have to just be about Google Cloud. I'm always happy to work with other folks who are interested in the same kind of thing and getting started, especially if you're getting started in your career and you have questions. I'm always happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Dan.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. I think that was a mind-blowing session, and I'd like to appreciate everyone that made this possible. Of course, we actually organized this together, several GDGs. So I would like to appreciate everyone for your efforts, your contribution to make this event a success. So I also like to, yeah, these are the GDG organizers. We have GDG Papi, we have GDG Guavalada, we have GDG Abuja, we have GDG Mina, GDG Learning, GDG Lafia, GDG Kefi, GDG Cloud Mina, DSC, Federal University of Technology Lafia. We have GDG Cloud Nuremberg from Germany. We have GDG Capital Region. So these are the amazing GDG organizers that actually put up this great event, put up this great meetup. So I'd like to appreciate everyone. Of course, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Google, GDG, Google Cloud, and JetBrains for the support towards this event and towards our community work. So we're going to ask now, whereby I would like to give opportunity to the GDG leads present to give 1 or 2 words about themselves and their chapter. So it won't take much time. I just want to give them just 1 minute because we're actually out of time. So I would like to call on first, in no particular order, I'd like to call on the GDG lead of Guagalada. And he does Just say hi. 1 minute. So I'll be announcing the winner of the challenge very soon. I'll be announcing the winner very soon. So I'll employ Abu Wahab. So please check the Twitter impression with the hashtag and let's know who got our JetSprint ticket coupon. Right, is the GDG lead for Guax here? What about the co-lead? Okay. All right, so what about the GDG lead of Abuja? I don't know if he's still on.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. Mr. I would love to hear from you.
Okay, I mean, it's been a great session, and for anyone who is planning to take these certifications, I think Dan has been able to give us a lot of insights, and he really went, very practical about it, especially talking about how to handle stress, your exam strategy, and how to filter out, the wrong answers and narrow down, the two possible ones and so on. I think that's what the exam is really all about, and that helps a lot. And we really appreciate it on behalf of GDG Abuja and all the other collaborating GDGs. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, I'd like to go to GDG Mina. I think Memunat, I think you can talk for GDG Mina. I don't think GDG is available. All right, I don't think she's online. All right, also I would like to appreciate the presence of my amiable boss, Mr. Namdi Okoro. He's the lead GDG Cloud Mina. I'd like to hear from you, sir. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, sir.
Well, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can, sir.
All right, so it's been a wonderful session with our very noble Mr. Dan, and I would like to appreciate you from Mina, and also buttress the point you made about learning or understanding how the GCP platform works before even the certificate. Because if you don't have a practical knowledge about how the Google Cloud Platform works, even if you get a certificate, it might be worthless. But the more you grow in using this platform, writing the exam will just be an application of your knowledge and even improve your experience working with the GCP platform. So I think for me, from this end of the world, I think it's better to understand the concepts and also be very, very open-minded to opportunities that might come up so that you apply them on the move. So I think from my own end, I would like to appreciate you and also thank you very much for giving us this wonderful lecture.
Thank you very much, sir. Okay, GDG lead for GDG Cloud Nuremberg. I'd like to hear from you.
Hey, hello everyone. Karen here. It was a pleasure to host time then. It was very it was interesting. It was a little bit different view on the material. So it was not a repetition of the first session, but it's really great and very much added value to everyone who took part. We will be putting out as well on our YouTube channel, so it will be universally available to everyone to watch it later.
Oh, great.
I think you very much for this amazing course, and I hope people will leave a honest feedback to this course on and it's pretty much everything. You got this material from Google at Coursera and Pluralsight as a fundamental kind of knowledge, and you got all these insights and interesting tips from where to pay attention to which parts. And also you got this amazing course which you can get today absolutely for free. So thank you Dan very much. Thank you everyone for doing this, making this possible. And yeah, let's have fun. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Karen. Also, I would like to also call the GDG lead of Ilorin, GDG Ilorin. I don't know if he's still on. GDG Ilorin. I don't know if he's still on. All right, let's move to GDG Kefi. GDG Kefi. If you're on, please like to hear from you. All right, let's move on to GDG Lafia. If you're on, please signify. Okay. DSC F Lafia, if you're here. Without wasting much time, GDG Capital Region. We're here, please. Let's hear from you. All right. So I'd like to thank everyone once again. It's been an amazing time with Dan, and this is a rare opportunity, it's a rare privilege. I'd like to appreciate everyone for joining this call. So I would like to. Okay, I have this a special session I want to actually do now. I want to. There's somebody that inspires me. One of the students that's okay, part of the scholars, Google scholars, and when I saw the inputs this particular person has placed in learning cloud, it's been inspiring. I had to just do this to appreciate, to also officially nominate him as the cloud student of the month. And his name is Ayomide Salako, is part of the Google Scholars. And okay, why am I saying he's the student of the month? Let me show you his results. He has actually taken 166 labs from Quick Labs. He has completed 19 quests. So I guess on a fair ground, can be regarded as one of the let's say most serious students in the current Google Africa scholarship. So kudos to you, Ayomide. Thank you for inspiring us, and thank you for taking this cloud platform very, very serious. Right, so you can connect with him, can relate with him. It's very good cloud computing. Right, so let's move on to the winners of the challenge. So I would like to display the tweets so as to be very, very clean as possible. Minutes. So we have a winner from Twitter. Okay. So I'm going to pick the winner from the hashtag of hanging out with Dan. So I mentioned that is the most important tag we have here. DG at home, hangouts with Dan. So I'm going to show the screen and let's see that here. Yeah, I'm sure we can see my screen. And from what we actually announced, the winner of this challenge has to be someone that has the highest impression, numbers of likes and retweets. So going from these tags, but actually say, you can check the tags yourself. So this is our winner. Informa is our winner. Congratulations, Informa. You are the winner of the JetSpring coupon. She had 14 retweets and 19 likes. So thank you for participating. Just go to our page at DDG Pape and DM us for your so that we get the right email for how to send the email. So just DM us to get in touch with you. So if you're here, please kindly indicate you're here. The winner, please kindly indicate if you're here, so that we know you're actually hearing from us. All right, so she's here. All right, so thank you very much, everyone. Thank you once again, Dan. This has been a wonderful session. So I'll say for me, it's a wrap. I don't know if you want to give us final words before we leave, before we depart, Dan.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you again for the opportunity. I really enjoy talking about Google Cloud and being around other people who are also excited about it. And I think you're on a great path. I think this is a great way to get started. And I'm really excited to, hopefully I'll get to work with you in the future sometime. So good luck with the exam. And again, feel free to reach out anytime I can help.
Thank you very much, Dan.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
All right.
So long.
Okay, let's take the group picture with you, Dan, before we leave.
Oh, there we go.
All right, so everyone, please just turn on your camera. Turn on your camera. Let's do the GDG sign. So my camera is actually having issues. I might not be able to present my own. So, but I want to see your beautiful faces. Okay, while we take the snapshots. We're done. Okay, we are trying as possible to make sure we don't miss the physical meetups. So we try to replicate most of our actions in GDG to bring it virtually. So this is one of the things we do after all meetups. We take pictures with our speakers, our special guest speakers. So thank you, Dan. I believe I've taken a lot of shots. All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. All results will be sent to your email if you fill the form. And also those are RSVP in various chapters, you'll get the email too. So you should expect that from today. Thank you very much.